Hi, Flor.
Hello, Pierre.
How are you?
Very good, very excited, very energized after a great afternoon.
Yes, so what did you do this afternoon? Have you been to some of the breakout sessions?
Yes, I did. And I have here, if I can get your silence. Thank you. Because I have a cool story to share about my breakout sessions. So I attended one of them. And I think the very cool thing about this event is that I'm getting to know the authors and the people that has worked on the books I've been reading to prepare for the Congress, on the toolkits, on the guidelines for youth program. So the breakout session I attended was one of those authors. So I got to meet him and hear from him. Did you go to anyone?
Yes, I went to two fantastic breakout sessions, and I was thinking there were fantastic parallel this weekend. On one side, we have the COP28, which is about what planets do we want for our kids. And in the meantime, we have the World Scout and Educational Congress, which is about what kids do we want for our planet. And those are the two sides of the same coin. And I think this is a very symbolic weekend for our humanity. So this is what I take off after those breakout sessions.
That's a really cool way to see it. I really hadn't thought of that. Thank you, Pierre. For our last plenary session, we have a keynote speaker that will navigate with us through modern education and skills.
We were super happy to have here Mr. Andreas Fleischer. He has worked for over 20 years with ministers and educating leaders around the world to improve quality and equity in education. Currently, he has initiated and oversees the program for international student assessment, the famous PISA that everyone knows, and other international instruments that have created a global platform for policymakers, researchers, and educators across nations and cultures to innovate and transform educational policies and practices. And I can tell this is a real pleasure and honor to have such a high-level guest here.
Yeah, so we will welcome him to the stage. He's the Director of Education and Skills and Special Advisor on Education Policy to the Secretary General at the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in Paris. Let's welcome to the stage, Andreas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and what a pleasure to share this time with you. I will be talking about the future of education, but you live that future of education every day, and it's just amazing to have organizations like this, where people learn to live with themselves, where people learn to live with people who are different from them, and where they learn to live with the planet. We need a lot more of that. We just came out of a pandemic that has disrupted a lot of what we do in education, the way we think about education. And the future will always surprise us. Climate change is going to disrupt our lives a lot more than the pandemic, for better or worse. And artificial intelligence creates so much uncertainty, ambiguity around us. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are very good to repeat what we told them. But what makes us human in a world in which the kind of things that are easy to teach, easy to test, have also become easy to digitize, to automate. They're just evaporating. Things that you learn in school, doesn't help you that much. And there's so many other forces that shape the world around us. In this world, we need to think much harder about, what means the future. Now, some time ago, we asked school leaders to what extent they talk about the big framing themes of our times. And you can see 9 out of 10 school leaders say, climate change is already part of our school curriculum. It's already in the school system. And also other topics, global health, hunger, migration, poverty. School leaders told us, don't worry about it, we already deal with this now. But when we ask students themselves, we got a different picture. On the one hand, most young people said, looking after the global environment is really important to me. This environment, the sustainability agenda, climate change is urgent, is important to young people. But when we ask them, can you do something about it? Or do you think what you're going to do is making a difference for people in other places? The bars get much, much shorter. And this is really the crux of education today, that we have made children passive consumers of prefabricated content, and they lack the agency to mobilize their cognitive, social, emotional resources to do things. And that's, why, the Scout movement is just a perfect example of the future of education, where this is not about talking, it's about really putting things into practice. We need just a lot more about this. In our last PISA assessment, we looked at the growth mindset of young people. Now, here on the horizontal axis, you can see a country like Estonia, where students believe, I don't know how to do this, but if I try and if I struggle hard and I know my teacher's going to help me and I'm going to be successful. They have that mindset that the sky is the limit to success. Indonesia, on the other hand, you can see that students often believe, well, it's all about the intelligence I was born with. So if I wasn't born very smart, there's nothing I can do. And suddenly you see that that growth mindset on the horizontal axis is actually very strongly related to academic success. You succeed when you have the right mindset, not when you have learned a lot of formulas and equations. And it's not just about academic success. Our data show that students with a growth mindset were more motivated to master difficult tasks. They had a greater sense of self-efficacy. They were less afraid of failure. You want to be creative? Well, you have to educate people to do things, to try things out, to take risks, to make mistakes, and to learn from and with mistakes. Growth mindset is what helps you there. That's what the future of education is about. But let's talk about, some of the big changes in our economies. When you look at the companies that are successful these days, who are they? These are all companies of the intangibles. They don't produce goods and services necessarily, but they deal with ideas, with knowledge. They often, created by a big idea, not by a big industry. They often, have their products before they get any money. There's a completely new world in which we live. The traditional, Fortune 500 companies, they still exist, but they're no longer the engines of our economy. That's the future of the economy. Innovation, ideas. You look at patents. Those people who will, have that next idea, connect the dots where the next big innovation is going to come from, will be successful, not those who just remember what they learned in school. Very important. And then look at this. Recently, we looked at creativity in children. And you might think I've put the chart the wrong way around, but it's actually the right way around. In every jurisdiction for which we have data, 15-year-olds report lower levels of creativity than 10-year-olds. If I would tell you your 15-year-olds do worse in mathematics than your 10-year-olds, you would tell me, well, there must be something fundamentally wrong in schooling. But we never ask that question when it comes to something like creativity, because we somehow think that's non-formal education. That's not about what school is about. But actually, the great thing is that we're all born with an abundance of creativity. If you have a 3-year-old son or daughter, they're going to question everything that you tell them. They're going to experiment with anything that gets into their hand. They're always willing to learn, always willing to unlearn, relearn when things change. But then we put children into school and we make them compliant with our ways of thinking, and then we get surprised when they lose what is most valuable in this 21st century, our ingenuity, our ideas, our creativity, our social skills. I'm a scientist by background, and it often breaks my heart when I see how we teach science like religion. We make people believe some scientific theory, then we give them lots of exercises to practice this, and at the end we test whether they remember our answers. Has actually nothing to do with science. Science is not about reproducing the wisdom of our times, it's about questioning it. That's where the future of education. ChatGPT gives you all the answers. The question is, can you actually validate? Can you test? Can you actually think around the next corner, the things that you do not get? Working and living. We see an increasing polarization in our societies. Those who have the right knowledge and skills and attitudes and values get better and better job prospects. And those who do not make that grade have greater and greater difficulties. And we have that toxic mix in many countries that actually young university graduates have difficulties finding work, and at the same time employers say we cannot find the people with the skills we need. No? Why is that? Because our formal education doesn't provide what makes you successful these days, which is not just about what you know, but has a lot to do with your attitudes to life, with your values, with your ideas, with your creativity, your problem-solving skills, with your capacity to do things. No? The most central skill for tomorrow is agency. No? Can you actually mobilize yourself? Can you take action? Can you navigate ambiguity, manage uncertainty? All the kind of things that you actually learn in the Scout movement. No? And polarizing labor markets means polarizing societies, polarizing democracies. No? It's all what you see today, polarizing political systems. No? Knowledge. No? You can actually see, when I went to school, things were very easy. All you had to do is remember what's in the school book. People made you believe, this is carefully curated, authored, just learn it. And you could be very successful. Today, you look up things on Google and you get 10,000 answers to your question, and nobody's going to tell you what's right and what is wrong, what is true and what is not true. But when you actually ask yourself, how well do people navigate this digital world? No? We looked at the age of 15, that's our PISA age. You can see actually there are a few countries here on the left side, Singapore, Korea, parts of China, where you have a good share of young people being able to do that. But in the majority of countries, actually, the majority are struggling with this. No? Being born into the digital world does not make you a digital native. No? This is about your capacity to navigate information, to be ready to deal with uncertainty, deal with complexity, no? Distinguish fact from opinion. And what you can see is our education systems are not preparing young people for this digital world of tomorrow. No? Last point, some people talk about soft skills and hard skills, and I don't think that's the right terminology, because many of the hard skills of the past are becoming very soft these days. They lose in value. They compete with ChatGPT and Google. Many of the soft skills of the 20th century become hard skills in the 21st century. Emotional resilience, curiosity, courage, leadership. Again, things that you develop so well. You can look how humans compare against artificial intelligence. That when it comes to talking, dialogue, well, technology is not yet so great. But when it comes to answering your questions, technology outperforms humans. And when it comes to knowledge retrieval, we humans have completely lost that out. So don't try to compete with a computer. Focus on the kind of things that make us human, which is the social kind of dimension of this. Now, the kind of things that are easy to teach, routine tasks are disappearing, technology-intensive tasks are on the rise, and you put the two things together, that's the future of work. That's what we know. That's where we need to go to be successful. Some people call of this a race between education and technology. Before the first industrial revolution, neither technology nor education made a big difference for most people. People lived quite happy on their fields and were self-sufficient. Then came the Industrial Revolution, moving technology ahead of the skills of people, and that created huge amount of social pain. And for the first time in history, people were not ready for this. Technology was ahead of them. And then we invented the schools that we have, great, making people compliant with the norms of the industrial economy, and it worked for centuries. We created a huge amount of kind of prosperity with this. But now, you have the digital revolution doing exactly the same thing again. Moving technology ahead of the skills of people. Now, the kind of things that we learn in school suddenly lose their relevance. We need to do new things. We need to actually, again, create, that curve of moving to the 21st century. And that is really what I'm talking about now. Knowledge is expanding, at exponential rates, and it's filled with so many facets, so many things that you could be learning every day. You shouldn't talk about education. You should talk about learning. People need to have that ownership over deciding, what do I learn today? How do I want to learn? How do I learn best? Where do I want to learn? In a school, in the environment, in the field, out there. And, when in my life do I want to learn? There's so many things to learn, but they always come with people. You know, your favorite school subject in primary school had probably a lot more to do with the teacher than with the content that you learn. We learn from and with people. Learning is never a transactional business. It's always a social, a relational experience. And never forget that. It's always coming through people. And you know, the school curriculum is just a tiny box, and we're trying to squeeze everything into this little box. And what often happens is that the beautiful features of our societies become very shallow shadows of themselves. You ask primary good school children about science, they all love science. Science is about nature, exploring nature, about understanding cause and effect, about doing things, experimenting, making mistakes. That is what science is. You ask 15-year-olds about science, they all hate it because it's become an abstract world of formulas and equations that has nothing anymore to do with their lives. But that is a mistake that we make. We reduce the rich features of the world to very shallow shadows, and we do that with more and more things, and we forget, you know, what learning really is about, what the future of education really is about. You know, it's about, you know, the realm of human knowledge. Artificial intelligence is not a magic power. It's just an amazing accelerator, a great amplifier. It's going to amplify good ideas and good practice in the same way it amplifies bad ideas and bad practices. Our human capability to make that distinction is so important. The realm of ethics and judgment, the realm of political and civic life, the realm of, you know, creativity, aesthetics, design, natural and physical health. That is what the future of education really is about. And when you ask students about their well-being, you know, here we ask 10-year-olds. 10-year-olds are happy children. When you ask the same at age 15, look at this. The bars become a lot shorter. Particularly for girls. 15-year-old girls are not that happy, and a lot has to do with the relationships that schools create for them. We have made learning transactional. You learn stuff. You don't walk with people. We need to reverse it, and we can change that. When you ask actually 15-year-olds about what makes them happy in life, you can see actually, you know, in some countries, kids are very, very happy. What makes them happy? It's actually not so difficult to see. Students who talk or meet with friends after school, one of the predictors for happiness. Good teacher support. Having teachers who know who you are, who are willing to understand, you know, who you want to become, and who will accompany you on your journey. Teachers who are not just good instructors, but who are good mentors, good coaches, good designers of innovative learning environments. Socializing with friends, parental support. And finally, more physical activity, being active. Those are the predictors what make kids happy, at least at the age of 15. When you ask yourself, you know, what makes you unhappy, it's largely about anxiety with schoolwork, making school a misery, and also high internet use, becoming an addict of technology. We can take these things to heart. This is what we really need to do. When you look at physical education at school, for example, giving young people a chance to do things. In some countries is very, very common, in others it's actually very, very limited opportunity for that. Now, some people say, well, you know, you have to make a trade-off between mathematics and physical education. Academic learning and doing things. We see them as opposing ends on a large spectrum. You have to make choices between the two. But the truth is, we have to see them as two sides of the same coin. Schools are usually very good to keep, you know, students inside and the rest of the world outside. But the future of education is about integrating the world with learning. And that's again why I think the Scout movement is such a great example. Look at this. You know, when you look at the relationship between academic learning here on the vertical axis and physical activity, you can actually see there's a very, very strong positive relationship. The more young people are active, the better they do in science. When you do a lot of sports, it's not so clear. You know, these are people who just sort of put a lot of effort into this and maybe forget a little bit about the academics. But that's a small group. But for most people, you can clearly see, you know, being in the world, doing things and learning things are not opposing ends on a spectrum. We need to bring them together. That's, you know, why I think we need to get rid of this distinction between formal and non-formal education. That makes no sense anymore in the world in which we live. It's all learning. We learn in different spaces. We learn with different people. We learn in different environments. No? That's really, really important. No? So, how could the future of education look like? Well, one future is simply we keep doing what we're doing. And is it very likely? I'm not sure. I wish not. But actually, education has persisted in this form for a long time. And, sometimes we as parents are part of the problem, not part of the solution. We get very anxious when our children no longer learn what was important to us, or when they learn things that we no longer understand. No? Sometimes teachers teach more like how they were taught than how they were taught to teach. No? And as a minister of education, you can lose an election when something goes wrong in education, but you rarely win an election over education because it takes a lot of time to translate good ideas into better outcomes. So it's really hard to change things. No? But clearly, this scenario will leave us nowhere. It will see more and more young people just leaving school, going away, doing other things. Leaves them on the street, not being able to get a job. Now you can look today, many job advertisements, many more than 10 years ago say, college degree not required, actually even not desired. Now don't waste your time with this. Come to us, do something that you can do. That's really, I think, a very important message. Second answer could be, that people say, I'm no longer going to school, I'm developing, my own learning environments. Technology now gives you plenty of opportunity to decide what you want to learn, how you want to learn. Artificial intelligence is becoming really, really good in providing you with alternatives. And one danger that we have is that this becomes the reality. People will just say, well, I waste my time in university. I'm just going to learn on my own in the digital world. And it will work for some. It may not work for others. So, third scenario takes it even further. You basically take complete ownership of your learning pathways. No? You may say, well, I learn a little bit in school, but then I go to work, I do other things, and then I go back to school. Micro-credentials will sort of be the tool to enable this. No? And I think actually you as a Scout movement should do the same thing. Give people credentials. Recognize them for what they do for society. It's a great contribution that I'm sure employers will value. Many people are doing this. This will actually replace the kind of formal degrees and qualifications that only recognize you for the time that you sit in a classroom. And what is a college degree today? It's basically a receipt for the tuition you pay. It is actually not that clear what value it actually gives you in many cases. And so I think learning as you go could be another reality that we see. And there's a last scenario. This is actually a really interesting one. Maybe schools become what they used to be. One of the trends that we have seen over the last decades is what I would call the commodification of education. Students became consumers of content, teachers became some kind of service providers, and parents became clients, and nobody took responsibility. And maybe in the future we will see a scenario where actually schools become much more social centers, where you will no longer make a distinction. Here's a teacher of mathematics and here's someone in the Scout movement, but we will see them as social hubs where actually societies come together. And we see actually some education systems today moving into that direction. If you go to Estonia, Finland, you see a lot of that already happening, where schools become really social hubs that provide health services, education services, that integrate different parts of society. They're very, very good in supporting students with special needs. No? Maybe that is the future. However, I could have added, if I had more time, 100 more scenarios. Nobody of us can predict, how tomorrow is going to look like, what the future is going to look like. And I don't think that's what we should be doing. But we should become much more imaginative about the futures that could be possible, the kind of drivers that change the future, the ideas that could frame the future. And the more agile we become to imagine different futures, the better we become to look at education in alternative ways. It's never going to be easy, It's never going to be easy, but what we need to develop and help develop is really a new form of learning. Basically, learners who can adapt to very different worlds in which they live, today, tomorrow, in a very, very different world, who can create opportunities for learning for themselves. We should not look at teachers to teach and learners who learn, but students as leaders towards a new future. Teachers as learners, and systems to be the great enablers, whether in the formal or informal. Having a positive impact on the world. I think that is so important. That young people grow up with the idea, what is my passion? Where can I become really, really good at? And how can I make a difference in our community, in our society? Being able to articulate, what you're good at. Not just doing things, but being able actually to show that, to articulate that. And also to be able to resilient and resistant to change. Easy to say, hard to do. There are risks and opportunities. How can we find the right balance between modernizing what we have and completely disrupting the model? Maybe we need a mix of both. How can we reconcile new goals with old structures? How can we, develop people who are globally minded but remain rooted in their local traditions, in their local cultures. People who do not have a floor under their feet, deeply rooted, are going to be ones who build walls around them. We see this all over the world. So giving people that local rootedness at the same time as creating global mindedness is really important. How can we foster innovation in an environment that is very conservative? That's also the reality. How can we integrate the virtual and the face-to-face? And last but not least, how we can shift from education that is providing something to learning that is building the agency that we need for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We will not let you go yet. You can drink some water. And in the meanwhile, I hope I was looking at you, and you were all paying a lot of attention. So I hope you have some questions, because we have Andreas still here, and he's open for some questions. But I would like to remind you what a question is. So you can stand up, say your name, where you're from, and really, really short question. The shorter it is, the more we can take. So if that's okay with you, you can just raise your hand up or stand up, and we will get you a mic going. Yes. Edward, here. We'll have... Here, it's coming. There we go.
My name is Eduard. I know that one of the most important efforts you have been doing is how to measure competencies. And clearly in all education systems, measuring assessment had been the goal de facto of learning. How do you think the work that you are doing on changing the way learning is assessed could transform education systems? Because for many years, Scouting has been dealing with the problem on how to prove the learning that it creates. And precisely what you are trying to do is to show that the learning that Scouting does goes in the direction of the competencies that should be developed. Thanks.
A very good point. I actually think this is actually a very serious point. We will rarely improve and scale what we cannot see. So I think the measurement part is really, really important. If you want to do good work, it's great. But if you want to scale good work, help others good work, you need to make it visible. And that's where assessment is really important. And I'm very actually optimistic. When I started our work 20 years ago, we could measure things like mathematics and science. Today, we can measure emotional resilience. We can measure curiosity. We can measure courage is sort of a big word, but curiosity, creativity. Creative thinking. I do believe, actually, today we have many, many tools. And I would actually say, one of the biggest mistakes that education made in the last centuries was to divorce learning from assessment. We make you pile up many, many years of learning, you come all this stuff, and then someone tells you, now tell me everything that you know in a very constrained, contrived setting, 1 hour, do this test. And that has created many of the problems in teaching and learning that has made us forget many of the things that the Scout movement develops, many of those skills. So I think we need to reintegrate learning and assessment, and this is where technologies become really, really good. Your smartphone knows a lot about your curiosity, your courage, your leadership, and your problem-solving skills. And I think we need to just find better ways to harness that information, make it visible and tangible, and give people recognition for that. It's technically possible today. It's very much, our education systems try to hold on to their monopoly of giving degrees and qualification, but it's not going to last for much longer. So I'm very optimistic that we can actually do those things today.
Very good, thank you. Yes, over here. The mic is on your way. If you would like to stand up. Here it's perfect.
Merci. Moi, je m'appelle Modi Ndiaye, je suis du Sénégal. Félicitations pour cette présentation très enrichissante et qui nous informe d'énormément de choses. La première question que je me pose, est-ce que vous envisagez de prolonger cette enquête pour que l'Afrique soit représentative de cette enquête? Parce que l'utilisation de la technologie aujourd'hui en Afrique, elle est extraordinaire. Et aujourd'hui, nous travaillons beaucoup en matière de changement de comportement, mais par le numérique. Ça aurait été intéressant d'avoir cette lecture comparative entre ce qui se passe en Europe, en Asie, dans les Amériques et aussi en Afrique. Mais félicitations déjà pour ce que vous faites. Deuxièmement, vous savez, le scoutisme, c'est aussi dans la forêt, c'est aussi dans le bois, c'est aussi le manuel, tout cela lié à la technologie. Est-ce que vous êtes en train de nous inspirer à aller vers un scoutisme digital ou bien une digitalisation du scoutisme? Comme quoi, si on ne le fait pas, on sera à côté de la plaque. Merci.
Yeah, you know, sorry, I need to respond in English. On the first question, we do actually have an increasing number of countries from Africa joining this work. Senegal has been one of them. We do not yet report the data, but they will be in part of the future. We also have Zambia, Kenya, Egypt. So I think there's an increasing number of countries from Africa that actually are now part of those comparisons. On the second question, you know, I think we need to be, you know, thinking harder what we can digitize. You know, you're absolutely right. It's the experiences in the real world, but sometimes, you know, technology can reflect them. I think to what extent, you know, technology can. We need to guard against replacing this. I do not believe, you know, that experiences that you do with people, that you do in nature, can be easily, you know, simulated or put into a kind of artificial world. But I'm sure that technology will play an increasing role to link and connect students and to give them an outlook to new experiences.
So much. I think we're running out of time, so okay, super short.
So I'm Lauma. Many years ago, there was one person from Scouts who gave me a little paper, and it was written, "Education is one of the strongest weapons to make a world better place," said by Nelson Mandela. And then for many years, I have thought about this word weapon, because I think we associate weapon as something not good. And then my question is, do you see that there is a lot of education that serves not for good purposes? And is there actually this competition between education for good purposes and for the bad purposes? And do we have to be aware of that as well?
You know, I think that's a really good point, and I have the same reaction when people these days talk about green skills. You know, in a way, the type of skills that you can use to develop green technologies are actually very similar to the skills that you can use to develop brown or negative kind of technology. So I actually think we should, you know, in a way, you know, education has created a beautiful world around us. You know, everything that we have is the fruit of education, our culture, our language, our, you know, society, our communities, our technologies, all the fruit of education. But the kind of education that we have has also created some very fundamental disconnects in our societies. And the disconnect between the, you know, infinite growth imperative and the finite resources of our planet, between what is technologically possible and the social needs of people, between the way we govern ourselves and the voicelessness of so many, between what we call our GDP, how we measure progress, and the well-being of people. And I think those disconnects are also a real outcome of the education we have. If we want to see a different world, we need a different education system. And I don't think this is primarily a question of knowledge and skills. It's very much a question of the kind of attitudes and values people have to deploy their skills. You can use your skills for creating something good. You can use exactly the same skills for creating something bad. And that is where the human capability really comes in. That is what artificial intelligence will not do for you. It's really about moving from situational values, I do whatever the current situation allows me to do. I take advantage of everything around me to sustainable values that actually get people to think about, their present and the future, and how to reconcile this, that get people to think about me and others, and so on. And I do think that shift is very, very much what the future of education needs to be about. If we want to see a different world, it's not so much about different skills. It's very, very much of giving people that compass to find out, what's right and wrong, what is good and what, and to navigate in our ambiguous times.
Great.
Very good point.
We thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.